Welcome back everybody to linuxacademy.com. My name is Terry, and in today's course we continue our preparation for the Linux Foundation Certified System Administration exam. Specifically in this video, we're going to be talking about system backups, how to create a system backup, and specifically we're going to be using the dd command. So the dd command will allow us to take backups of various things to various formats. So let's take a look at our system. So what disks do we have available on our system that we might want to back up? So if we do a df-h, we see that we have SDA3, which is our root partition, SDA1, which is our boot partition, and then we've got SDB1 and SDC1, which look to be mounts that are about 1 GB in size. And then finally we have what looks to be the Dropbox shortcut, which is an external mount for some shared files. Now what I want to do is I want to take a backup from one disk so that I have what we call an image file. And in order to do that, I use a utility called dd. Now if I do a man on dd, we'll see that it converts and copies a file. And just as a quick reference back to things we've learned in the past, in Linux, everything, disks as devices, files and folders are all treated as if they're a file from within Linux. So from a dd perspective, we're going to be looking at what do we take in and then what do we write out. And there are a number of options that you can use dd that control block size, the number of characters, etc. But we're just going to use the basics for backing up our file system, and then in a subsequent video we'll talk about how we might be able to restore it. So let's go to our mount directory, and we'll see we have the mount points for disk B1 and disk C1. So disk B1 and disk C1 are the mount points for the SDB1 and SDC1 directories that we talked about just a moment ago. So I want to take a backup. For example, if I look in the mount directory for disk B1, I have made a copy of the etc directory, and it's the etc directory on this particular system, so it's got all of my files on it. It doesn't really matter, I just wanted some files that I could look at from an image perspective. But what I want to do is I want to take a backup of that particular entire file system using the dd utility and have it into a single image that I might be able to work with later. And it's easy for me to do because I can just say, give me a backup of a particular partition or an entire disk and write it to a particular location in an image file. So we're going to do a dd, and then we're going to say the input file that we want is the dev SDB1 directory, which is the mount. It's actually the file that contains the folder that contains the file system SDB1, which we just looked at in the mount for disk B1. And we're going to say that I want you to output it to the root directory, which is my file system home directory for the root account, and we'll call it, appropriately enough, SDB1 image. Now this is a really small file system, it's only 1 GB in size, so it'll only take a second or two to create this particular image directory. Keep in mind that the larger your file system, the longer this process will take, and it's not going to give you any feedback while it's doing it. It's simply going to complete it and then give you all of the information about what it wrote in and what it wrote out. So it tells us that it copied 1.1 GB worth of data. And now if I do an lsal on the root directory, which is where I told it to write it to, and let's do a star.img, I should end up with an sdb1.img directory that's about 1.1 GB in size, which it is. Now an additional file system that you might want to make a copy of is, for example, an ISO image. So if we look at our df-h, we see that we have the mnt cd-rom directory on device SR0. And in this case, it happens to be the mount point for our VirtualBox, so it's got the VirtualBox files in it. So if I do a du-sh, on mount CD-ROM, it tells me that it's 56 megabytes in size. So it's not terribly large. So let's go ahead and make an ISO copy of the CD-ROM so that we can keep a backup of that for future reference as well. And that would be as easy as doing a dd input file equals, now I could do dev sr0, or I could do mount CD-ROM, either one, but the output file is going to be root, and then we'll call it vmtools.iso. And it says that it's written those out, and if I do an ls al on the root directory on the .iso, actually I called it ido for some reason, a typo, I see that the ido file in this case, but let's do a move of root vmtools to root vmtools.iso. And now we have our vmtools.iso. And the good thing about that is I can mount that particular ISO file into another directory, because an ISO is a well-known utility using the loopback command for being able to mount a file system. We do talk about how to mount file systems in another video, so we won't go over that here, but I suggest that if you haven't already viewed that, go ahead and take a look at that. In our next video, we'll take a look at what do we do with these images if we want to restore them across either directories or other disks, and we'll take a look at how to do that next. But for backing up our file system using the dd command, my name is Terry for Linux Academy.